Okay, I'm Dan Fitzpatrick at stockmarketmentor.com, and I want to look at Hasbro because this has been quite a toy, right? Okay, so the thing that's so interesting about this is that it's had a heck of a run just over the last 3 days. You can see what's happened, but this stock was in an uptrend for a while. I mean, you can see it coming here, and then it really, really broke out back at this level. I'll get back to that in just a second. But what I wanted to show is that this is in a steady uptrend here, and then it really starts to accelerate. And what's the most difficult thing to do in a stock like this is, first of all, do you buy it up here? The answer would be no. You're too late on this. If you want to, you certainly can. And one way to do it is to say, all right, I'm going to buy it here. But if the stock falls below the intraday low here, then I'm out. Okay, well, that you're risking 3%. But what do you think the chances are that it's going to do that sometime prior to this making another 6 or 8% to kind of make it worth your while? I don't know, but I just don't like those odds. So it wouldn't be the way that I would trade this. But this is the way that we are trading this. Okay. So I saw this on, this isn't exact, it's not exactly place where it should be here. I'll put it here. I'll put it up here. I saw this on this particular day. We'll get rid of that on the 5th when the stock just broke out. It broke out on volume. Doesn't look like much volume now because of this, but back then, this was actually above average volume on the day. So this break broke out. This is when we put this stock, I should say, I put this stock on the active trade list because I like these volatility squeezes coming out of a really tight pattern here. It's getting tighten and tighten. It's just squeezing. The volatility is really being compressed. And then we get a nice breakout, walk along the bands, and then takes a little breather here, which you like. And then suddenly it just kind of takes off and you look at the volume here. So we've had a nice trade. Raising our stops along the way. They're kind of just protective stops. Took a few weeks before I could even justify saying, all right, well, I want to raise the stop to break even. So we take a loss completely out of this trade. But what has happened lately is it's run like it ran along this 8-day exponential moving average. And then it's really taken off to where like the 8-day EMA is clear down here. And so you could say, all right, well, I want to keep my stop just below the 8-day EMA, but that you're really giving it about an 8% risk on this. And you could do it that way, but I like to do it a different way if you're involved in something like this. The first thing to do would be to to just treat your current position as if you were making a new position in the way that I just described at the beginning of this. Like, okay, well, I know I'm buying late, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. But if the stock reverses and completely retraces this move, then I'm out. Okay, well, maybe that's a good way for you to be doing a protective stop on your existing position. So that's one way to do it. But another way is to do what I just did, which is just extend the 8-day EMA up. Extend it so that you can say, all right, well, here's where it is here. Fine. But in a few days, as this thing marches on, this is really going to start climbing up close to the current price. That the 8-day exponential moving average is really racing, trying to catch up with the price because the price is going so far. And so if you do it this way, then you can just kind of keep a trailing stop along the extended 8-day EMA, which gives you more of like this kind of a deal. You could just put your stop up a little bit higher. So anyway, that would be my suggestion as far as how to trade Hasbro. It's important for you to know if you're not a member, our active trade list is absolutely crushing it. And I'm giving you entries. I'm giving you the basis for why to get in. We're raising stops, kind of like we did here. We're tracking a trade and going all the way from beginning to end. And so if you want to not just make money, but learn how to make money rather than just get some stupid stock picks, definitely try Stock Market Mentor. Okay. I challenge you to come in there and lose money because you know what? I don't think too many people have met that challenge. They're all making money. So unless you don't want to do that, I want you to join us. Okay. All right. That's all I got. I will see you next time.